If your answer is always "I'm fine," and it's out of your mouth before you've had time to check whether it's true, this one is about you. Because you say you're fine, and almost everyone assumes it's a lie. A polite one, maybe a brave one, but a lie. By the end of this, you'll know why it isn't a lie. And I think that's the more uncomfortable answer, because a lie would be a choice, and this isn't one anymore. Start with the moment itself, because there's a detail in it most people never notice. Someone asks how you are, and you answer immediately. Not after a pause, immediately. Faster than you'd answer almost any other question, including easy ones. Yeah, good. Fine, you. It arrives with no processing time at all. Now here's the tell. You are fastest when it's least true. Think about it. On an actually ordinary day, when nothing's happening, you sometimes have to think about it for half a second. Is anything going on? Not really. But on the day something is badly wrong, the answer comes out instantly and slightly too brightly. And then you change the subject before anyone can follow up. The response time is inverted. The worse it is, the quicker you are. That's not what lying looks like. Lying is slow. You have to construct something. This is faster than the truth, which means it isn't being constructed at all. It's being retrieved. So what is it if it isn't a lie? Here's how I'd put it. It isn't a lie. It's a compression. Think about what the honest answer would actually require. You'd have to explain the thing itself, then the background that makes the thing matter, then why you can't just do the obvious solution everyone will immediately suggest, and then you'd have to manage their reaction to all of it. 15, 20 minutes. And at the end of it, they'd be carrying something they weren't carrying before. Now look at the question that was actually asked. How are you? Usually said in passing in a doorway between other things. It is not a request for information. It's a greeting with a very small slot attached, and the slot is about 2 words wide. The true answer does not fit in the slot. "I'm fine" does. So you're not concealing. You're compressing something large into the only container you were handed. And the compression is accurate in the way that a summary is accurate. It just loses everything that made it worth saying. There's a second thing happening, and this one's more generous than people give you credit for. You've run the arithmetic, and the arithmetic says, my honest answer costs them more than it gives me. They have their own week. They asked in a doorway. If you answer properly, they now have to be a certain kind of person for the next 20 minutes, and they didn't sign up for that when they said hello. So you protect them from the cost, and you file it under being easy to be around. Most people reading you as closed off have never considered that the closing might be a courtesy. And here's the detail that makes this whole thing quietly unfair. You're often the one who asked properly. You're the person who says no, but how are you actually? And then stops talking and waits. You notice when someone's answer came out too fast. You follow up 2 days later about the thing they mentioned once, which means you know exactly what being asked well looks like. You have a detailed working model of it because you built it out of the times you needed it and didn't get it. So it isn't that you think the honest conversation is worthless. You think it's valuable enough to give away carefully and somehow not valuable enough to request. Those two beliefs live in the same person without ever meeting, and if you put them next to each other for a second, the second one looks quite strange. But there's a third layer, and this is the one that actually keeps the habit locked in place. It isn't rejection you're avoiding. You're not really afraid they'll think less of you. You're afraid of being handled badly by someone who means well, because you've had that. You told someone something true and they got it slightly wrong. They gave you the obvious advice, or they made it about themselves, or they went quiet and clearly wanted the conversation to end. Or worst of all, they were kind in a way that felt like being handled, like you'd become a situation rather than a person. And that costs more than never being asked. Being met badly with something fragile makes you less likely to take it out again for years, so you stop presenting the material. Not because people are bad, because the failure rate was high enough to make it not worth the exposure. And none of it actually stays contained, which is the irony of the whole arrangement. It leaks sideways. Your replies get shorter. You cancel something and blame work. You're briefly, disproportionately irritated by something tiny, a noise, a question asked twice, and you hear yourself and don't like it. You sleep worse and blame the coffee. The people around you register all of it. They can tell something's off. They just have no name for it. And because you told them you were fine, they can attribute it to a cause, so they look for one. And the nearest available explanation is usually themselves. Have I done something? Are we okay? So the silence you kept to spare them ends up costing them anyway, just in a currency neither of you can see. You didn't remove the weight from the room, you removed the label from it. Now, before I take this any further, if you've been recognizing yourself for the last few minutes, that's what this channel does. One mechanism at a time, taken apart properly, 3 times a week. Subscribing means the next one finds you, instead of you having to remember this existed. Right. Now the part that turns a reasonable strategy into a real problem. Do it long enough and it stops being a decision, because at some point the ability to answer honestly is a skill, and skills that go unused for years don't stay intact. They get quieter and then they get slower, and then they're not really there. So here's what eventually happens. Someone safe finally asks. Someone you trust at a good moment with time, genuinely wanting to know. And you want to answer. You actually want to. And nothing comes. Not a wall. That would at least be something to push against. It's more like reaching for a file and finding an empty folder. You can feel that there's a lot in there and you cannot produce a single sentence of it. And then you say, "I'm fine, honestly," and you watch the moment close, and you're the one who closed it. You compressed for so long that you no longer have the uncompressed version. You have the summary and nothing else. And there's a cost sitting underneath all of this that nobody warns you about. People believe you. That's the whole problem. You did it well. You were convincing. So you get filed as the person who's doing okay, steady, low maintenance, not one of the ones you need to keep an eye on. And low maintenance people don't get checked on. Why would they? So the concern goes to the people who show it, which is correct and fair and exactly how it should work, and you end up standing slightly outside all of it, quietly wondering why nobody asks twice. Nobody asks twice because you were excellent at the first answer. That's the part I want to be honest about. This is not a case of people failing you. You built a very effective system for not being a burden, and it worked. It is currently working. That's the trouble. Now let's talk about where it started, because this rarely begins in adulthood. Somewhere back there, fine was the correct answer. Maybe you grew up in a house where your state was one more thing on an already overloaded adult. Maybe the atmosphere depended on nobody adding anything, and you learned to read the room and then not put anything into it. Maybe when you did say something true, it was minimized. You're being dramatic, other people have it worse. And you learned that honesty gets audited, or maybe nothing dramatic happened at all, and you were simply the capable one, the one who didn't need managing. And that got noticed and praised, and being the easy one became the thing you were good at. In any of those houses, fine is an avoidance. It's competence. It's a child correctly working out what the environment can absorb and staying inside that limit. The problem is, nobody comes along later to tell you the limit is moved. So you keep operating inside a constraint that stopped existing years ago in rooms full of people who could easily absorb the real answer. So what do you actually do with this? And I want to be careful, because the standard advice here is just be honest with people, and for you, that advice is useless. It's asking you to produce the uncompressed file, and we've just established you don't have it. Being told to open up when the mechanism has atrophied is like being told to sprint on a leg you haven't used in a decade. The move is much smaller than honesty. It's one notch, not the truth. One notch below fine. Bit of a heavy week, nothing dramatic. Honestly, a bit flat, but I'm okay. Not my best few days, but nothing's on fire. Look at what those sentences do. They still fit the slot. They're short, they don't hijack the doorway, nobody has to become a therapist, but they're true, and they hand the other person a small handle. They can let it go, or they can say heavy how, and now you're not deciding whether to open the whole thing, you're just answering a follow-up question, which is a completely different and much easier to bite, and do it on an ordinary day, not a terrible one. That's important. If the first time you try this is the worst night of the year, you're asking a rusted mechanism to carry maximum weight, and it will fail, and you'll conclude it doesn't work. Practice it when the stakes are nothing, so that the muscle exists when you need it. You'll notice something the first few times. It's uncomfortable in a way that's out of proportion to what you said. That's not a sign you did something wrong. That's what using a disused thing feels like. There's one more thing to expect, and if nobody warns you about it, you'll read it as proof that you were right all along. You'll say the slightly true thing. It'll go fine. Better than fine, usually. And then, somewhere in the next day or two, you'll get an odd wave of exposure about it, a kind of retroactive embarrassment, Why did I say that? They didn't need to know that. I've made it weird. Nothing has gone wrong. That feeling is not information about how it landed. It's what happens when a system that's been sealed for years registers that something got out. It fires the alarm afterwards, on delay, regardless of whether there was any danger. Know it's coming and it loses most of its power. Don't take it as evidence. Take it as the sound of a door that hasn't been opened in a long time. One honest note before I finish. There's a version of fine that isn't compression at all, where the true answer is that you're not sure you want to keep going. That one doesn't need one notch, and it doesn't need a clever sentence. It needs an actual person, and there are people whose entire job is to sit with exactly that. Telling them isn't a burden. It's the thing they're there for. 3 of these a week, if you want them. Because you were never lying to anyone. You've been giving the accurate summary of something nobody had room for so long that you forgot the full version was allowed to exist at all.